Here with an incredibly volatile, fast-moving situation unfolding right now in the Middle East. A few hours ago, Iranian missiles targeted a U.S. base in Qatar. It is home to 10,000 U.S. military and civilian personnel. This video on your screen right now shows the moment when missiles were intercepted. Loud booms were heard in Qatar's capital. A defense official tells NBC News that there are currently no reports of casualties. Those strikes happened after the U.S. had warned American citizens in Qatar to shelter in place, anticipating such an attack. Now the region and thousands of U.S. service members deployed in the region are waiting for whatever else unfolds. An official telling NBC News that the Pentagon is aware of imminent threats against bases across the Middle East, not just in Qatar. The big question right now is whether Iran will continue to retaliate against the U.S. and whether Iran's nuclear program is crippled but still viable after those Israeli and U.S. airstrikes.
There is a lot of scrambling in MAGA right now to defend Donald Trump as he breaks one of the biggest promises of his campaign, that there would be no new wars under his administration. And more than anyone, J.D. Vance is the most panicked because he projects himself as this anti-war conservative, but of course he has to align with dictator Donald. He has to align with his boss, and in doing so, not only has he humiliated Trump as he kind of screams his way through questions, but he's humiliated himself as he lies about what was a failure of an operation that Donald Trump launched on Iran, and that happened on Fox of all places. We're going to get into it all and how JD screwed himself and Trump. But before we do, I want an important breakdown from our friends at MSNBC Nicole Wallace, detailing how Donald Trump screwed his own plan from the start.
There is brand new reporting on just how we got here so quickly that raises even more questions on how Team Trump is going about handling delicate, fragile, important, and consequential decisions regarding U.S. foreign policy as this crisis unfolds in the Middle East. That new reporting in the New York Times reveals that Donald Trump was influenced, seemingly first and foremost, by Fox News, obsessed with looking like a winner in their coverage, and a Pentagon that scrambled to contain any possible damage to the operation that Donald Trump's narcissism could cause. As one official tells the Times, quote, "The president was the biggest threat to OPSEC." That means operational security that the planning faced. Wow. The New York Times also reports that the White House's statement that Trump would decide on whether to strike Iran, quote, "within the next 2 weeks," was always a ruse. It's never true. He'd already decided to launch a military operation when that statement was delivered by the sitting White House press secretary, whose salary is paid for by the American taxpayer, from the podium. But that 2-week statement had the effect of, quote, "cleaning up a mess, the telegraphing of the attack that was partly of the president's making," end quote. That mess was caused by Trump's unhinged and almost ceaseless social media posts. Everyone should evacuate Tehran, unconditional surrender in all caps, among others, according to the New York Times. Those posts, quote, generated angst at the Pentagon and U.S. Central Command, where military planners began to worry that Trump was giving Iran too much warning about an impending strike. They built their own deception into the attack plan, a second group of B-2 bombers that would leave Missouri and head west over the Pacific Ocean in a way that flight trackers would be able to monitor on Saturday. That left the misimpression for many observers, and presumably Iran, about the timing and path of the attack, which would come from another direction entirely.
Nicole Wallace made clear what is not surprising to most of us, which is this plan was doomed to fail from the start because it involved Donald Trump and his own idiocy, his bleeding, his screaming, his tweeting aloud for the Iranians to remove the most crucial part of our attack, the uranium, that Donald Trump and Vance and the entire administration were seeking to destroy and claimed. For a short time there that they did that enriched uranium, it had already been gone. And so what did Donald Trump accomplish with this strike besides breaking a promise that J.D. Vance touted for so long and is still kind of trying to, but he doesn't know what he wants to get out of this current moment? And so when he went on Fox, he was expecting kind of a softball interview. It didn't happen. Brett Baier confronted him about what he let slip, saying that the enriched uranium had been taken away. And Vance's answer was just so stupid. I want to check out Chris Murphy's response right after it. But first, let's take a look at Vance.
You said totally obliterated. The president has said totally obliterated the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
Do you know for sure where all the highly enriched uranium is?
Well, Brett, I think that's actually not the question before us. The question before us is, can Iran enrich the uranium to a weapons-grade level, and can they convert that fuel to a nuclear weapon? And we know, based on the success of our mission, of course, the leadership of the president, but the incredible skill of our military, that the two mission objectives are completely successful. We know that they cannot build a nuclear weapon. Now, you asked about the highly enriched uranium.
Yeah, like 900 pounds of it.
But what we know, Brett, is that uranium is something that exists in very large supply. Our goal was to bury the uranium, and I do think the uranium is buried, but our goal was to eliminate the enrichment and eliminate their ability to convert that enriched fuel into a nuclear weapon. I think that's an important point, Brett, because so many of the folks who have focused on the highly enriched uranium,
sure, 60%.
The main focus, Brett, has been to destroy their enrichment capacity, because we don't want that 60% uranium to become 90% uranium. That's the real concern, and that's what was so successful about our mission.
So after all this, if the Iranian government survives as is, what's to stop it from rebuilding over time if they in fact moved the 60% highly enriched uranium? You know, that's the concern.
No, the big concern, Brett, and this is again what we destroyed, is their ability to enrich uranium. If they have 60% enriched uranium, but they don't have the ability to enrich it to 90%, and further, they don't have the ability to convert that to a nuclear weapon, that is mission success. That is the obliteration of their nuclear program, which is why the president, I think, rightly is using that term. But here's the question. If Iran is desperate to build a nuclear weapon in the future, then they're going to have to deal with a very, very powerful American military again. Our hope is that the lesson that the Iranians have learned here is, look, we can fly a bunker buster bomb from Missouri to Iran completely undetected without landing once on the ground, and we can destroy whatever nuclear capacity you build up. I think that lesson is what's going to teach them not to rebuild their nuclear capacity.
Yes.
So Senator Murphy really just hits the nail on the head. Their JD doesn't know what they wanted out of this mission. Maybe because he was out of the loop, but maybe because he didn't want it in the first place. I don't trust JD Vance on anything. But it does seem like he did want to hold true to that promise that Donald Trump's administration wouldn't be starting any new wars, but of course Donald Trump is going to break all of his promises. So you were fooled once again, JD, but this was not a successful strike. You can't frame it as that. You cannot continue to reframe what Donald Trump wants. This is all MAGA does, is move the goalpost first. It's no new wars, but then this isn't a war. But then this is a war. But it's Donald Trump's correct war. JD, Vance even said that the presidents of the past were idiots for how they failed in the Middle East. And what has Donald Trump done just that? And JD couldn't squirm his way out of the question, and I'm surprised Brett Baier even took it that far, but good for him. But this is not the only example where we see, of course, the contrast between Trump and the stooges around him at Vance is trying to maintain his political future and maneuver himself best he can. But some aren't being as subtle as JD and Tim Miller broke down on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace. Just how Thomas Massey is making it very, very clear how much he opposes Trump.
I think that is potentially, he could lose that if they suffered real consequences. And I think that's where, like, the reality of what happens with the economy, what happens over in the Middle East, will impact whether or not, this fissure turns into a real political problem for Trump. But I do think it'll be a political problem for JD and whoever wants to succeed him going forward, because you're right that, like, the base, if it was not Trump doing this, the base would be opposed to this. If this was Mitt Romney going into Iran, the MAGA base and the MAGA media would be united. There would be no fissure, because everybody would be against it. And so I think outside of the context of Trump, the battle will wage on. And I guess I would say one other thing on the actual merits of the policy the people who have the maximalist view on both sides have turned out to be lying, which is, tells you a lot about MAGA, right? Like Trump and his defenders on this attack have been saying that, they took out everything of the Iranian nuclear material, and then we found out that isn't really true. And then the people on the Tucker Carlson wing were saying this is going to lead us into World War III, and BRICS is going to get into the bat war, and et cetera, and that hasn't borne out, at least at this date. So, a lot of this is kind of is also an inch deep. It's a battle taking place on the internet, not in real life.
But in real life, this is a betrayal in a way that even tariffs aren't. I mean, tariffs are about doing this fetish, right? Tariffs are a fetish for Trump. And so they're a betrayal in that his promise to all voters was that, quote, the grocery would go down on day one. Now he's reversed and said, no, things are going to have to go up. But this feels different because I think what he's said to his base since 2015 is, I see what you see in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. No role for America. I see what you see in the uselessness of lame allies in NATO. And so he has been both the, pot stirrer as well as the vessel for the impulses of isolationism. And now he's turned his back on all that and David Ignatius basically writes that he abandoned his own controversial intelligence head and relied on Israeli intelligence. It is so anathema to America first. I don't even know how you draw distorted dots to get back to America first.
Oh, well, that is absolutely true. I know on the merits it is a betrayal. On the merits, not America first. And it's impossible to even make a cogent argument that there was a urgent American national security interest at play here, right? I mean, like maybe, down the line, or maybe, within the context of geopolitics, right? That's what would, some national security, minded folks on both sides of the aisle would say. But like within the America First rubric, there isn't any rationale for this. It has been a betrayal. And I think that what they're pushing through on the Hill is a betrayal. Like the question is, can those betrayals penetrate the cult-like following? Can they penetrate the media environment that these folks are swimming in, where they're getting a lot of pro-Trump propaganda? And I think those questions are kind of unanswerable. But like on the actual merits of the policy, you're certainly right, Nicole.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I spend too much time like in upside down land trying to see it the way they see it. But I think the politics being so tricky are why Trump is tweeting incessantly. Like I haven't seen him tweet this much, I don't know, ever, since he lost the 2020 election. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. See, we do spend the same amount of time at the bottom of the barrel. Thank you.
It'll be quite interesting to see how MAGA continues to eat their own as this unfolds and what it really says about their party. Sure, some of these attacks are just Twitter squabbles, but really it represents something deeper, that this party has no direction. It is a cult of Trump. We've always known that. But how does MAGA unpack the civil war that's coming after Trump if there's this vacuum of policy, of thought, of idea, when they actually do begin to clash? If there's nothing underwriting all of this, they really just will tear themselves apart without their dear leader. And, that's something I so look forward to. We're going to be covering it all on this show. You know that even up till 2028, gosh, that sounds like a long time from now. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.